Today on Fear and Greed, the Reserve Bank has opened the door to a rate cut next year, saying inflation is falling. One of the biggest deals of the year is teetering on the brink after one of the companies gets hit with a massive tax bill. And Google announces the most searched terms and issues for 2024, plus plenty going on in markets, and Rupert Murdoch fails to change the family trust. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Wednesday, the 11th of December, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, the Reserve Bank of Australia has left the benchmark interest rate on hold at a 12-year high, as everyone expected, but there are signs that maybe, just maybe, they are starting to think more about a rate cut, Sean.
Maybe, Michael, maybe. Governor Michelle Bullock said the economy is moving in line with the Reserve Bank's forecasts, and if that continues, at some point, inflation will move back into the target band, and at that point, the board of the bank will consider cutting rates. She's still very focused on what the data says, and she wants to see 2 quarters of lower inflation data. Didn't give any timing for any shift in rate cuts, and she said the board didn't explicitly discuss cutting rates when it met over the past few days. However, she also said the board deliberately dropped any mention of rate hikes in the statement that accompanies the end of the board meeting, and that's because economic data is softer. In Reserve Bank speak, when you add something or take it away, it is significant. So rate hikes are off the agenda. All important in this. In late January, we get the December quarter inflation data. We get unemployment figures, a couple of those in the next couple of months. We also get business survey data. Now, yesterday, figures from National Australia Bank showed that business conditions and sentiment, sentiment's actually quite weak and conditions are just pottering along. We've had 13 months with the benchmark at 4.35%. If we can look at the business survey data, the employment market, the inflation data, if it all softens, maybe, just maybe, we get a rate cut. One other interesting thing in her press conference yesterday, she was asked about the incoming Trump administration. Michelle Bullock said tariffs and government spending in the US could be inflationary for that country, though it may not impact Australia too much directly. However, the brewing trade war between the US and China is more of a concern.
Sean, I've got to mention a must-listen interview that we have coming up after the show. You're speaking today with Warren Hogan, who's the Managing Director of EQ Economics, economic advisor at Judo Bank, and he has a very, very, very good track record for picking what rates are going to do.
And if you are hoping interest rates are going to fall over the next 12 months, then maybe Warren's not your man. But as you said, he's done a great job in picking where interest rates are going. Now, he says there might be a rate cut, but it won't be till the middle of next year, and he's not even sure that we're going to get one then. So well worth a listen.
Yeah, indeed. It's coming up a bit later on after the show. Sean, how did financial markets react to not just the Reserve Bank decision, but the commentary around that decision?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost more significant. Bond traders have now ascribed a 50% chance of a rate cut in February next year and 100% by April. The Aussie dollar, which was trading above 64 US cents, dropped back below that mark immediately after the 2:30 p.m. announcement. Now, in the short term, the Aussie dollar depends or goes up and down depending on what people think will happen on interest rates. If rates are expected to fall, then that puts the Aussie dollar under pressure against the US dollar, and that's exactly what happened yesterday.
And what about the ASX? What happened there?
Well, it had been trading quite a bit lower, and then the announcement came. By the close, it was only down, down less than 0.5% by the end, 8,393 points. Plenty going on in the market, quite apart from the Reserve Bank announcement. The tech sector tumbled most yesterday, down more than 4%, that index. Now, there was a big sell-off in Pro Medicus, for example. It ended up down 8.5%. It has run very, very hard. Maybe there's some profit-taking going on, so it gets to a level where people think, okay, it's gotten so high, we might as well take some money off the table and sell at this point. Certainly, the company didn't release any new news yesterday. Other tech stocks such as WiseTech Global, Xero and REA Group also fell sharply. The banks were lower, National Australia Bank, it was off nearly 3%. Westpac was off more than 2%. The big winners, though, were the miners on the back of more upbeat news out of Beijing. More on that in a moment. Fortescue Metals Group jumped 6.5%. Rio was up 5%. BHP more than 3%. In terms of corporate news, Treasury Wine Estates bought a group called Stone and Moon. It's a winery in northeastern China for about $27.5 million. Its share price jumped on the back of that. Platinum Asset Management fell another 3% yesterday. Now, on Monday, Regal Partners came out and said, we're not going to buy Platinum Asset Management. They were doing due diligence on it. Platinum then tumbled 7 or 8% on Monday, another 3% yesterday. Not good for them. And Myer held its annual general meeting yesterday. Chair Olivia Wirth said Black Friday sales were encouraging, although it's been a challenging start to the retail year.
Let's talk about China quickly. Sean, you mentioned the strong performance of the big miners, and that was on the back of hopes that Beijing is about to unveil further stimulus for the world's second largest economy.
So China's Politburo, Parliament, let's say, said it would embrace a moderately loose strategy for monetary policy next year and a more proactive fiscal policy. Beijing has made a bunch of small stimulatory moves over the past 3 months in terms of interest rates, which is monetary policy, and fiscal policy, which is spending. Hasn't had a big bang. But those comments yesterday suggest that even if we're not going to get a big bang, there's still going to be plenty more coming down the pipeline. And that's what really got iron ore miners excited yesterday, for example. Also helped push oil prices higher. Otherwise, in global markets, Bitcoin's fallen back to about $95,000 a unit. Still very high, but it just keeps getting to that $100,000 a unit mark and then falls back. Now, it crossed it last week, obviously. It's tested that a few times since then, but just can't seem to get across the line.
All right, Sean, we've got plenty still to cover. We're talking Rupert Murdoch's legal battle. We're talking Woolworths, more bad news for Woolies, and Google's search terms, the top terms for the year, pretty much as you'd expect, but maybe a few surprises. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Rupert Murdoch has failed in his attempt to change the terms of a family trust that would have ensured that his eldest son Lachlan gained control of the family media empire when Rupert dies.
That empire, that's Fox News, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, the Australian Daily Telegraph, Sky News Australia, is a very influential organisation. Now, a Nevada court ruled against the 93-year-old Mr. Murdoch, rejecting arguments that it would be better for the whole family if Lachlan oversaw the business. Lachlan is currently chair of News Corp. He's more conservative than his siblings, that being James, Elizabeth and Prudence, the older siblings. The Rupert Murdoch argument was that the News Corp empire would be more successful if it remains with a conservative bent, and Lachlan is better equipped to do that. However, according to the New York Times, the Nevada commissioner characterised the plan as a, quote, carefully crafted charade, end quote, to permanently cement Lachlan Murdoch's executive roles inside the empire, regardless of the impact such control would have over the companies or the beneficiaries of the family trust.
Did you see, Sean, some of the coverage about this, talking about the role that the TV show Succession played in this, which I just thought was fascinating because obviously it is believed that the TV show Succession is loosely based on the Murdoch family and the empire, and that in a kind of a weird kind of circular way that an episode of Succession actually inspired action within the Murdoch family to start taking some steps to kind of preserve the family and just plan ahead for what might happen in the future without spoiling anything to do with the TV show. That I just think it's funny that the TV show that was arguably about the Murdochs has actually then inspired the Murdochs to take some action based on that TV show.
Allegedly, Michael. Allegedly. Yes. Good point. Reportedly or something. Yes.
Yeah. Now, Sean, fund manager Perpetual could be hit with a tax bill of more than $500 million over the sale of assets to private equity group KKR, potentially halting the $2.2 billion deal.
Certainly investors think so. Perpetual share price fell 9% yesterday. The tax office has queried the sale of some assets to KKR. The transaction, which still needs shareholder approval, gives KKR the Perpetual name its corporate trust, and its wealth management businesses. They're considered the best of the Perpetual businesses. Yesterday, Perpetual came out and said the revised tax bill is closer to $500 million rather than the $106 to $227 million range disclosed in August. What's that mean for shareholders? In dollar terms, it means the bid by KKR is worth about $6.08 a share rather than the previous indication of $9.10 a share. Now, in a statement, Perpetual said it is extremely disappointed, disagrees with the ATO's view, a bit to play out, but you can imagine if shareholders think they're getting $6, not $9 a share, well, that puts the whole bid certainly on ice, and it may cause it to slip on that ice.
Sean, in politics, there's a storm brewing, shall we say, over the use of the Australian flag, after opposition leader Peter Dutton said if elected, he would only stand in front of the Australian flag and not the Indigenous flag.
So Prime Minister Anthony Albanese regularly holds press conferences, meetings, that sort of thing, in front of both flags. Peter Dutton told Sky News that Australia should be united under one flag, and he would never address the nation with both the Australian and Indigenous flags behind him. Later, Shadow Home Affairs Minister James Paterson doubled down. He said Australia needs to have a unifying flag. Now, he was referring to the current Australian flag, but I think the point is that it doesn't unify all peoples that live in this country. Anyway, that's going on, Michael.
Yes, indeed it is. And just while we're on politics, Sean, senior Liberal frontbencher Paul Fletcher will retire from politics at the next election. Don't know why I said his name so oddly just then.
Paul
really
Fletcher.
Put a lot of emphasis on the Fletcher, didn't I? Sorry, go on.
It raises the prospect of Bradfield, a once Liberal stronghold in Sydney's Upper North Shore, going to the Teals next election. It has always been held by the Liberals with a strong margin that is now considered not so strong. It's under 4% now. Mr. Bradfield follows Simon Birmingham out the door. Both are considered moderate Liberals. Mr. Fletcher, who used to work at Optus, said after 15 years in politics, he needed renewal and plans to return to the private sector.
God, 15 years in politics is a long time, isn't it?
Ouch.
Yeah, indeed. Things aren't getting any better at Woolies, Sean, with the New Zealand competition regulator filing charges against the retailer and its Kiwi rival Pack and Save, claiming they are misleading shoppers on promotional prices and specials, Sean.
Oh, so familiar, so familiar. The Commerce Commission's Deputy Chair, Anne Cullinan, said the regulator was not satisfied that specials really are special. She said supermarkets in New Zealand have been on notice for a long time about having clear pricing and accurate labelling of specials. Woolies has been in New Zealand since 2005, has almost 200 stores, though earnings have disappointed recently. In Australia, along with Coles, Woolies is fighting action launched by the ACCC that alleges promotional prices on hundreds of products were actually higher than a few weeks earlier.
Sean, it's that time of year. Google has released its top search names and phrases for 2024. Politics, sports people, pop stars all come out on top.
No surprises, but there is one big surprise to me. So the US election came in at number one. The most searched phrase was "Who won the US election?", which I think is ironic because we all found out who won the US election without having to Google it. Anyway, the most searched for Australian was John Singleton, probably as a result of his personal relationship with the Bondi stabbing attacks earlier in the year. The most searched for definition, Michael, this is the one that threw me. Demure, Demure.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, you don't know
why,
do you?
No, I don't. Do you?
Yeah, there was a TikTok viral trend earlier in the year, and it was somebody that they were talking about being very mindful, very demure, and so all of a sudden that just took off, and everybody jumped on board. Businesses, everyone, and it was so intense for a period of about a week, where everybody, every business under the sun was putting out videos about very mindful, very demure, and then it just died away, as these trends tend to do.
So my 16-year-old, I told her this and she goes, oh, yeah. She'd like, of course. What I think is interesting is how many people then don't know what the meaning of the word demure is.
Oh, yeah. So they're not actually looking up the trend. They're actually just trying to figure out what the word is. Yeah.
So the meaning of demure. That's actually what it was. Yeah.
They're using Google as a dictionary as
Yeah.
opposed to actually looking up the trend like you would be doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. The Olympics came in at number 2 on the list of Australian searches after the US election. Then the Euros football tournament. Liam Payne, who of course fell to his death from a hotel balcony quite tragically in October, was number 4. Taylor Swift, who finished her mega 2-year tour, was number 5. Number 6, though, was Connections. Do you know what Connections is?
I have no idea.
Oh, Jackie and I are avid Connections people. It's a New York Times puzzle. So Wordle was the big one, but it's added on, and it's now the mini crossword was big. Now it's Connections. And so they give you a bunch of words, 12 words, 4 by 4, it must be 16 words, and you've got to get the connections between them. It's fantastic.
Oh, that is good. Do you need a subscription to the New York Times to play, or is it just a...
Yes, and you cannot have mine.
I'm pretty sure I know your password anyway.
You do too.
Looks like I'm playing Connections today. In international news now, a serious story, Sean. Police are interviewing a 26-year-old over the killing of a health insurance executive in New York last week.
An incredible story. Brian Thompson was United Healthcare's CEO. He's walking to a conference early one morning before 7 a.m. when he was shot from behind in a targeted killing. All along, there have been suspicions that the killing related as much to healthcare companies rather than the individual. A manhunt has been going on ever since. There was a breakthrough when CCTV footage showed parts of the killer's face. A tip from the public said a man fitting the description was at a McDonald's restaurant in Western Pennsylvania. Police attended, spoke to a 26-year-old, Luigi Mangione, and discovered he had a fake ID and a gun and silencer similar to those used in the killing. He also had a handwritten manifesto condemning healthcare companies for putting profits above patients. He is now assisting police with inquiries.
Omnicom Group, Sean, has agreed to buy Interpublic Group for $13 billion US. That's 21 billion Aussie. That will create the world's largest advertising company.
So Interpublic shareholders will receive Omnicom shares as part of the deal. It's expected to be done in the second half of next year. Been a really tough time for ad agencies. Big tech companies have been hoovering up the marketing dollar. We talked about that yesterday or the day before, wasn't it? Something like 72% spent in big tech companies. Also, ad agencies, great creative agencies, but generative AI are creeping into the work of those agencies. The benefit of this big tie-up in part is cost savings. The deal will create a company with combined annual revenue of $25 billion US, well ahead of the now number 2 London-based WPP. It has turnover of about $19 billion US.
And finally, Sean, China will inquire into NVIDIA over suspicions that the US chipmaker broke anti-monopoly laws around a 2020 deal.
The State Administration for Market Regulation opened an investigation into NVIDIA's recent behaviour as well as the circumstances surrounding the acquisition of Mellanox Technologies. Beijing said the Chinese government approved the deal 4 years ago. Not so happy now. Now, there was a condition on that. NVIDIA couldn't discriminate against Chinese companies. The move against NVIDIA is Beijing's latest response to escalating US technology curbs and comes a week after the Chinese government banned exports of several materials with tech and military applications, according to a report on Bloomberg. In a statement, NVIDIA said it's happy to answer any questions regulators may have about its business.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed daily interview. Warren Hogan is your guest today, all about interest rates and the outlook, where things might be going in the next year or so. It's coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is a very important website to remember, Sean, because it's where you sign up for our free weekly newsletter, which comes out today. It comes out in a matter of mere hours, and the panic on your face as you realise that you now need to start writing said newsletter. Any tips as to what you might be giving us your unvarnished opinions on?
Plenty of interesting stuff. Can I leave it there?
Yeah.
The economy. Economy gets a run.
Yep.
A bit more on Google, actually.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. Oh, you're full of mystery today.
Yeah, full of it. I'm quite demure today.
Yeah, you are. You're absolutely full of it. This is great.
I'm
All right. Head along to fearandgreed.com.au, pop your email address in, and the newsletter will land in your inbox mid-morning. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 11th of December, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.